My name is Laurie, spoke earlier. Back on stage here with three hackers from our community. We have Jonathan Bowman, we have Casey, and we have Herman. And we're here today to deep dive into one of the subjects we touched on earlier, which is AI, and specifically generative AI. So I don't know about you guys, but I have a Mid-Journey license. I troll my wife endlessly with AI-generated distorted fingers. It's my speciality. We're going to stay away from that topic today, focus on cybersecurity, and talk about the implications in both the customer side and the hacker side from this new kind of revolution that's taking over the world. First of all, I think it'd be great for everyone to get to know the hackers. So let's start off with you, Jonathan. Could you introduce yourself and a fun fact that you'd like to share with the audience?
Hi all, I'm Jonathan Bowman, or Jonathan Bouwman in Dutch. I've got a background in healthcare, work as a medical doctor for 2 days a week, work in a hospital doing research, also partly AI stuff. And I work as a chief medical information officer for the city of Amsterdam, so trying to figure out how data flows between primary healthcare, hospitals, etc. I'm participating as security researcher on HackerOne for the last 4.5 years. I got a background as full stack developer, so that explains a little bit why I'm hacking as well, besides the healthcare stuff. So yeah, maybe the fun fact is bugs humans, bugs computers, do both.
Whenever we have a program in trouble, we always say, send the doctor. That's where Jonathan comes in. So yeah. Great, and so Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm also a doctor, though not a very useful one, because I've got a PhD, not an actual doctorate to do medical stuff. Don't ask me any medical questions. I got started with hacking thanks to a HackerOne live event where they had mentees coming in from like local women in security groups. So I applied. I didn't think I'd get in. I went. I didn't think I'd find anything. And I went home with $1,000 because I actually found my first vulnerability despite never actually doing it before. Then got invited to another live hacking event, realized I actually might be quite good at hacking, and decided to share kind of my learning journey online. So I made YouTube videos teaching other people getting into bug bounty hunting and trying to bridge that gap from, maybe they've installed Burp, maybe they know they want to be hackers, to, okay, now you can actually find your first real vulnerability in real software. My fun fact is that $1,000 bounty, I went to a very fancy shop in Bath, and I spent about half of it on knitting yarn because I'm a knitter. I went in there feeling like, make it rain. Please give me all the fancy yarn. I haven't actually used the yarn because it's too expensive for me to actually use. Because I'm like, you know what? I can't justify actually knitting with this. So it does just collect dust.
Great, yeah. And I think I was there. It was Moorgate, wasn't it? The live hacking event where you found a vulnerability. Yeah.
We went back as well. The HackerOne one this year, and it was like I felt so nostalgic over the whole thing. Yeah. Going back to where I actually found my first bug.
It's also where we had the best ever swag, which was football scarves with HackerOne and Sherlock Holmes themed coins, which was pretty cool. Yeah. Awesome. So Herman, saving the best for last here.
Right, so my name is Herman Satkauskas, and I am not a doctor of any kind. In fact, I'm very much a recovering startup founder. So I fell into hacking fairly recently, so that was probably kind of like 1.5 years ago. And about 6 months later, I kind of admitted to myself that I'm much better at breaking things rather than building them. And the rest is history, to be honest. I've been doing that full time since then. And I guess it's kind of interesting because I come to this whole thing from essentially a non-technical background, because I worked for different tech companies, multiple ones. I've ran my own as well for a couple of years, but let's not talk about that. And yeah, basically, I kind of have this understanding of both the business issues and also, like, I've started learning technical stuff. I was always a little bit tech aware. So it feels great because, like, I feel I still have, like, so much to learn on both sides, and I really, really like puzzles.
Yeah.
So that's that's essentially why I'm here. And fun fact, like, even though my first name is Herman, I have zero relation to Germany. I'm Lithuanian.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's unfortunate. Awesome. So the topic of today, the panel discussion is artificial intelligence and how it's used in hacking. I thought it might be first quite interesting just to speak to Katie specifically, because your PhD is in natural language processing. Let's talk about what we mean here. Because there's a lot of confusion between like AGI, AI, generative AI, and all the AI is out there. Let's just talk a little bit about what we mean in the hacking space here.
Yeah, sure. So my background is NLP, even before, so natural language processing, even before I went into security, I did like ancient language decipherment as my like dissertation topic. So a lot of the kind of buzz that's just happened around NLP for a lot of people in NLP is like, oh no, we've suddenly got the spotlight right on us. So generative AI is like a subfield of both natural language processing and image generation. It's about generating new data from old data. So generating text from a bank of existing text. When we start to talk about things like general AI and AI kind of as a subfield, we're kind of thinking more anything that seems to be machine intelligence of some description. And yes, that does mean that some AI is literally just if statements. That is definitely the case. And then what we also have is a bunch of other types of AI, so things like machine learning. We have things like data science and statistics. That also comes under the same umbrella. While we're talking about generative AI, so ChatGPT, Midjourney, the other like LLM models, so the things where you can give it a prompt and it will generate a bunch of text for you or generate an image, that's generative AI. But it's certainly not the entire field of AI, even if it feels like it at the moment. There are people doing other things in AI, the poor researchers.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and we have Claude and Pi, and there's lots of names for these AI engines, yeah. And when we were preparing for this panel, one of the interesting facts that I learned about you was that you got into AI through languages.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of, the reason why I decided to do NLP was when a bunch of, like, during the Bronze Age, a bunch of writing, right? You're probably familiar with, like, Egyptian hieroglyphics. We couldn't read that until we had the Rosetta Stone, which has, like, 3 different pieces of text. It has Greek, hieroglyphics, and Demotic, which is, like, handwriting form of hieroglyphs. And they were able to compare the Greek that we can read to the hieroglyphics and eventually translate the language. There's a whole lot of language that does not have, like, multiple multiple languages on a single document. And that's what I did. I went and looked, instead of looking at like how do we take one language and like compare it to another language, going how do we compare it to itself to translate it. And there's a great video of a conference talk that I gave and I fell off the stage for. So there's a great talk out there. I'm sorry that I fell off the stage and there's a bit of an ow moment in the talk. Very professional.
The subjects blew you off your feet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. And that leads us nicely on to Herman. So Herman, you're not really a coder, are you? Like no. When it comes to languages, you're not really a coder. So one of the questions that is on my mind is what's the impact of these new engines on people who don't have a coding experience but are interested in hacking or are good at hacking?
So basically what difference AI makes to myself personally. So let's say if we take myself a year ago, like I basically figured out how to use like clever Google searches to potentially do a lot of damage, but I didn't. I submitted them, those things as reports. Yep. And I was actually, to be honest, I was surprised how easy it was to basically find those vulnerabilities, like stuff is like on the surface without any automation, without like, it helps if you understand a bit of technology. But even without that, I'm like, holy crap, this is amazing. And then I started playing around with AI, and I realized that, oh my God, I was so lazy to actually learn coding. Let's say a year ago, I was like, I'm too ADHD for that, you know. And like, but hey, you can actually tell this thing, like, what do you want it to do? And then it's going to take you a few tries, but like, all of a sudden, I can do Python scripting, I can make all of these basic tools, I can actually ask it to kind of guide me in the right direction here and there, and admittedly, I'm a script kiddie, and I have no shame, because like it helps me actually find like a lot of the stuff, and like that was the impact. And I think this is like one of the bigger things that everyone should think about, that I'm the good guy, at least on the surface. I do these things ethically, but these lowered barriers are now accessible pretty much to anyone. So I think this is like one of the bigger changes that we are going to see very, very soon. There's going to be a lot more people that realize they have all of the tools available at their disposal. They don't have to learn. They just have to be pretty creative, and some will be malicious, unfortunately. So that's my perspective.
It's like 3D printers and 3D printing guns, right? It's the cyber equivalent.
Pretty much,
yeah. And Jonathan, so obviously we spoke about generative AI in my talk earlier about vulnerability reports. And I believe that you were part of that story, right? So you've got practical experience of using ChatGPT to do bug hunting with like monetary values behind it. Do you want to tell us the story?
Yeah, it was funny. I was sitting over there watching your presentation, and I saw the screenshot. I was like, wait a minute, if you zoom in on the top right of this Chrome window, it's my picture. So that's right, yeah. It's a funny story. I had a live hack event, and the scope was super hard to me. I'm a web application hacker. I'm really used to break applications that are coded in some browser and stuff. But I was not I was not good in breaking new coding languages. And this particular event was all about a new coding language, try to break it. And I was like, I don't have a computer sciences background with all the old theory and stuff. So how I approached that was, I think 7 months ago, so the early days of ChatGPT, is I copy-pasted all the documentation I got my hands on, removed all the references to this company, as I needed to be sure there was no new training data for this ChatGPT model. I also opted out for the training of it. In the old days, you could just email opt-out@openai.com. It's not an option anymore. But I feeded the model all the different structures, all the stuff, and I just start asking it, like, knowing this, where would you start if I need to find a bug? And like Herman just told us, it takes you a few prompts before you really get to the point that it's not hallucinating, but actually giving you worthwhile stuff. And long story short, it took about 48 hours to find 5 bugs. In this coding language, it was literally copy-pasting the code generated by ChatGPT into a compiler, and it crashed, so good bugs. But crashing is not interesting. We want code execution. We want actually the code doing stuff that it should not do instead of just crashing. And that's where humans come in. And the live hack events, think of 50 hackers in a room, collaborating, sharing cool stories. Not really about the money, more about really good stories. So we hopped on a team with 6 and just looked at the 5 worthless bugs, maybe worth $200, $500, still good money, but not that much. And we managed to escalate 2 of the 5 into a critical bug that paid about $12,000. So that's where human brains come in and think like, hey, if this happens, you need to do this and this. Yeah. And I could not pull this off without ChatGPT.
Yes,
or exactly. With a language model. It could be any language model. Though.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that there have been studies done recently which show how these technologies can elevate the level of your most junior employees to the level of a senior employee, basically. So it's a great way of giving people skills that they would normally take years to learn, right? And the same applies, obviously, for security. But in this case, it strikes me that it gave you something okay, but it was really you guys getting together and creatively thinking that took it from a $100 report to a 12K report, basically.
Exactly, and I learned so much in this 2-week span of collaborating with ChatGPT, but also the people involved with the competition, and that's a big takeaway. Yeah. Save you money, learn a lot of stuff. You can ask the model, explain me, and it explains. So, yeah.
And it's obviously lowered the bar for cyber criminals too.
Yeah.
So let's talk about these models themselves then. So obviously, lots of people are worried about the security of the models. And I wonder, Casey, if you could talk to us a little bit about what kind of security vulnerabilities could these models introduce into someone's attack surface if they implement them?
Yeah, I don't think it's surprising that last week Microsoft actually launched an AI bug bounty program, because these AI models, for some companies is just going to be, we have an API link to OpenAI and we just send it a prompt just before that says, you are now support assistant. Please help the customer with whatever they write in the next prompt, whatever. That isn't necessarily controlled by them. But as we start to see this technology mature a lot more, there's a lot of other ways that this technology can be broken. And especially what we're seeing is the introduction of vulnerabilities that are specific to AI systems. So things like prompt injection, things like using untrusted input from a large language model, causing something like remote code execution. But we also have data science-y, machine learning, ML ops engineer stuff, like model inversion attacks, being able to get the model to recall the training data, being able to poison the data and poison the model, and backdoors that activate new functionality in the model. There's kind of this weird thing that, you kind of need that security brain, but also that AI brain to actually start to understand, oh no, we are absolutely screwed. We're in so deep at this point. I don't know how we're going to get over it. And I think when the attackers start to realize that, I think maybe in the next year or so, we'll definitely see that general specialty of AI plus security rise even more than it has already. Right now, it's 5 people in a room that meet at the one conference every year. But I think we're going to see that explode over the next 12 months.
Yeah. I had a funny moment with our large language model when I was preparing for this talk. The screenshots you saw earlier. I asked the model to generate a nuclei template for me for a vulnerability report. And the model said, I'm not going to do that for you because generating this is naughty. You shouldn't be doing hacking. And I said, oh, but I'm working in defensive security. And they said, oh, OK, here you go. So it was a very easy argument to be had there, very easy argument. And so we have new vulnerability categories like prompt injection. We have new vulnerability categories like data poisoning. One of the questions that I think I have is, historically with bug bounty, we've always priced vulnerabilities using a classification system that's based on CWE and CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System and the Common Weakness Enumeration. They don't really work with these vulnerabilities, do they?
No, not really. I mean, it's hard, and I'm sure you've done a lot of AI hacking. I know you're good friends with a lot of the AI hackers already, but they're just very different. And the problem is that we're often talking about that impact in terms of human impact. Your data could be stolen. That's really hard to quantify in CVSS because it's measuring integrity, availability. And even though that to that individual, it can be an awful thing to have happen to them, as far as CVS is concerned, it's a low. And that dichotomy is very difficult. Yeah.
I just wanted to add as well that a very interesting experiment that anyone working on the inside of a security team or anything like that can do, and this, I really liked some of the comments from the previous talk, is that you can actually obviously scrub everything, anonymize, but literally load up a security finding into ChatGPT and ask it, we're a company with a market cap of 100 billion. We have this potential vulnerability. We're in the automotive sector. How much is this going to cost the company if this falls into the wrong hands? And this maybe will help you answer some of your questions as well in terms of how do you pitch this to your management? Because all of a sudden, I've tried this and the results are kind of striking because it literally, if you point it in the right direction, it will give you a ballpark number. And that's already quite something.
I fully agree on that, because for us hackers, we can show you there's a bug somewhere, give you an alert pop-up in your browser, but that's not the actual impact of the bug. We can get code execution in some user session, some administrator, we can take over the full website maybe. And those language models might help you translate some really technical reports into fully easily to understand reports for any leadership without any technical background. So
I've actually used this quite a lot, like literally to describe the impact of like seemingly some, not that sensitive data, but it was proprietary still. Yeah. And I asked it like, what could the potential impact be on this?
So
it gave me 5 very scary sounding bullet points. And it's like, competition is going to screw you. You're not going to recover from reputational damage as a company. Like, that's the sort of language you want to put across towards the management board, because like it's what I think they speak, right? And bear in mind that like this same experiment, any black hat hacker could easily run. And from that, it becomes like, how much am I demanding for ransom?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I like this though. How much to pay for a vulnerability? Just ask the AI. And they'll tell you. Yeah.
I'm not sure if a lot of your customers are going to like it.
No,
It's time for us to poison the model.
Yeah.
And every low severity bug is worth $1,000.
Yeah.
And one of the other interesting aspects I've noticed is the skill sets required to do AI hacking is slightly different. And one of the AI red teaming engagements I saw, the skill selection that we normally have are kind of like, must have knowledge of GraphQL, or must know how to, get it, turn a Swagger file into an API interaction, that kind of thing. And the requirements for these red teams seem to be things like, we need philosophers, anthropologists, linguists. It's quite a different kind of hacker, really, isn't it? Yeah.
I think what's interesting about that is actually I think we've always needed those people. Like, one of the reasons why bug bounty programs work so well is because you have this diverse range of voices, right? No hacker is exactly the same. And especially when you think about that international element as well, if you're based in the UK, hiring Brits who live in London, like, you've got kind of like a kind of slight bias towards a certain way of thinking. But then when you open up your kind of eyes and maybe also your wallets to the global hacker community, you're going to find different vulnerabilities. And I think the point of AI using these diverse voices, we kind of always needed them, but we weren't always like accessing them correctly.
And on a purely technical level, just to add to this, like some features can be geo-restricted. I know it's been mentioned already, but one of I had the situation with Disney where no one could figure out what was wrong because they were testing it from America, so it took quite a bit of back and forth, but they finally realized that it was actually locked to the UK. So this is like from my experience.
Yeah, the context matters a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. For me, that's also the challenge from coming from the Netherlands. Setting up a shop in India is super hard. Trying to release a book in Japan, it's also hard. But that's if you got a hacker or a friend we can collab with in India or Japan, then you can move on and find those security bugs somewhere hidden on the surface. So that's also a really big advantage of working with bug bounty hunters in a community together.
Yeah. Not to mention just the simple fact that some people know different languages and they will be able to so much more easily recognize problematic parts. Like this should not be there.
Also with AI, there are super cool tricks where you mix up languages and stuff, then you bypass all the filters.
Translate this into English and then do what it says.
Or mix up every syllable in a word. Stuff like that. It's crazy. Yeah.
It will block bomb in English, but you put it in Chinese or Japanese, and it just goes straight through. It tells you the answer. Yeah. It's super interesting. Yeah. Great. So I've kind of seeded the questions for the first kind of 20 minutes. I thought now would be a great chance to open up to the audience to see if anybody out there has a question they would like to ask on the subject of generative AI hacking or the broader topics that we've been speaking about today. Oh, it's like London buses.
So is AI going to be really that much of a change? If we look back at hacking tools, the development of hacking tools, we had like pre-Metasploit, pre-Kismet. There's always been a new tool that's going to change the thing. Is that just another step? And, it will be in Metasploit or Kali Linux in a few years.
Definitely, yes. It speeds up my whole hacking process. For example, right now, if I need to combine two of those tools, I literally paste the URLs of the GitHub links with the source code to ChatGPT, and I tell it, I've got here some shell code that I need to run on a Windows machine, and I want you to obfuscate this code with this tool from GitHub. Give me a one-liner. That's what I always ask, a one-liner, because ChatGPT always answers this, then it answers like that. And I could literally copy-paste that stuff. Of course, you need to check, is it hallucinating, yes or no? And that's where the human comes in. But it might save me like 70, 80% in those sorts of situations. So yeah, gives you more bucks in the end.
I would say definitely no. Just to be super controversial. No, you know what? I don't tend to use AI to solve problems like that. I like, my background is development, so I'm like, my first thought is stick it in, code it. I wonder if it depends on the kind of hacker you are, maybe, whether or not you use it. I mean, I think it's important, don't get me wrong, like I love ChatGPT. I wouldn't have done a PhD in NLP if I didn't like it. It would be a really dumb idea. But I don't know if it really has like changed the game for me. It hasn't been this like, I still use Burp, and that's my main tool, and that will always be the main tool I use, I think.
So I will add a third opinion, obviously. Everyone has to be unique. So I don't, like, the way I see like AI and cybersecurity at the moment, I'm actually not too worried about these specific tools that hackers are going to build. Like, sure, it's going to speed up a lot of them. It can, bring people like me to the scene, or more people, like, basic scripts, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not worried about that. However, what AI does actually remarkably well is kind of using existing information to producing something creative. So there's tons of vulnerabilities that were not considered vulnerabilities at all, but by many companies. Like, imagine metadata in pictures, right? So when you take a picture with your phone or camera, by default, it stores all of the location data, like what phone you're using, like stuff like that. By default, like, no one's gonna bother like really exploiting that unless you're tracking down some very specific individual, right? And a lot of companies ignored this. But now, what you can do if you find a vulnerable platform like that is basically ask ChatGPT or whatever it is to write like 1 million threatening emails, like phishing, stuff like that, like literally generated based on the data that's in there, like, because the location is there, the time of day, like it could fake something like a request from the police of that country where you were at that time, and like it can write it in a very, very scary way. And already, I've actually seen some numbers recently. I think it's kind of crazy, like 40 to 50% of organizations already think that they've received these AI-generated phishing emails. And if you think about all of the information that's kind of like out there, like some forgotten Trello board or an old Google group, like there's going to be 1,000 emails in there. Like maybe not now, but in 6 months, like you can task ChatGPT to learn all about everything about the relationships within that. Like it's very soft information, but like how you could use this is actually pretty scary. And I would especially be afraid of state actors abusing this, because we all know Russia, like we all heard about their hacking groups, but a lot of this stuff can be much more easily weaponized. Like all of the stuff that was considered trivial, and like people didn't even bother to fix this. So I think it all boils back to the fact that, yeah, you need to actually protect those core assets a lot more.
I find this debate super interesting because on the one hand you have like the, what Plato said about writing. He said writing will promote forgetfulness in the minds of the writers. So he's saying that, let's not write, right? And so you have people who are saying like, well, AI is just going to make people dumb, basically. Everything's going to be generated. And then the other hand, you kind of see the potential for, especially for APT, I think, training LLMs on exploit code and being able to dynamically generate new exploit code that can avoid your malware prevention services, et cetera. And then at the hacking side of it, obviously, as well, where you can generate lists. When I did my GDP statistics, I was like, give me a table of the top 200 countries and tell me their populations. And it just gave me a list in CSV. So it super speeds up your work, and it's general purpose rather than Metasploit, which is very specific to each vulnerability. So I think this debate's just going to go on forever, for the next few years at least. So let's open up to another question.
Hiya. Taking us away, perhaps, from AI, but I was hoping that each of the hackers could tell me what they're interested in hacking at the moment.
I'm really into hardware hacking at the moment because that's literally a black box often. You get some device back home that opens your door if you enter the right PIN code. I want to know what's going on there and if you can properly patch that. Same goes with cameras, security cameras, stuff like that. So that's
all the bugs I find really are lame. I will be the first to. If you ever go to something like DEF CON, the people on the main stage are like, "Look at this massive piece of hacking I did. Look at me go. Here's a live demo that actually works. Look how great it is. I've been able to access this person's phone from 3,000 miles away." My bugs are not like that. My bugs are very kind of business logic related. So the kind of things I really like to hack are like applications I use myself. Because I understand them and how they're supposed to be used, I find it really fun to kind of take that attacker point of view and take that background knowledge and turn it into, okay, what can I do with this? So things like, my main email client is Outlook. Okay, so I know Outlook's features very well. How can I start to break some of the access controls it has, for example? But I will be the first to admit that my bugs are not super technical. They're just functionality related.
So I guess I'm following here. So in terms of industries, I would say airlines and hotels, just because I actually like there's a bit of a physical aspect, and it basically funds my travels. I just came back after 3 months in Japan, so thanks to that. But in terms of the type of hacking that I like, I absolutely agree with you. The not very technical stuff is insanely powerful, and I know that again I focus on impact. But the other type that I really enjoy is basically something like asset discovery, because oh my God, you won't believe where you can find on Trello to this day the public boards. This is actually probably my proudest moment as a hacker, and I did not even actually receive a response, but I saw that these guys fixed it in about a week and a half. So it was actually a South American country, I'm not gonna put any names here, that ran it was basically a sexual victim protection program run in its entirety on Trello.
Oh my gosh.
Police reports, locations, every single, 500,000 files. So that's, I like looking at stuff. Sometimes it's all it takes.
And that also, it's super important that your scope is big.
Yes.
If you want to protect your customers, the people working for your company, be aware that stuff might be just somewhere hidden on Trello. So if
Trello, Google Groups, any weird platform, end of the day, the attacker is not gonna care about your scope, about your rules, and
that sometimes worries me because I'm also protecting the public interest. And if I'm not having a safe communication channel, because the scope is like this, or you get upset, like, this is out of scope, and it impacts customers, but it's out of scope. If I don't have this safe channel to report those sorts of bugs, you might get lost, you lose grip on them. You don't see them in your inbox, or, yeah.
It's sometimes not even about the bounty. It's about It's about the fact that this is just public and on Google.
Yeah.
And you're just worried about their customers.
Yeah. Yes.
End of the day, my favorite programs are the ones that do consider their scope. They have some ground rules, for example. Don't try, brute forcing actual credentials. Like, fair enough. As I think the gentleman from Sega mentioned that they have a line that says, like, if you see something, like, please send it to us so we can at least have a look. Exactly. Because you can't imagine how much of a difference that makes, because like a lot of hackers are still afraid of being sued or booted off the platforms or God knows what.
Yeah, that's important.
And the Attack Surface Recon project that we've launched actually is a product that we've tried to harness the energy of gentlemen like Herman, where customers can actually buy a 2-week engagement where they can try and discover things like shadow IT. So that's one of the innovation ideas that we've come up with this year, is like, people have been doing this for as long as I've been at HackerOne. Can we put this into a product and make it consumable from customers to try and discover these shadow assets where PII might be leaked, which have been missed by our traditional tools, which tend to be quite narrow in their focus. Yeah.
That's super interesting.
We have a question here.
Yes, thank you. I actually wanted to add something on the previous question before asking my question. So the previous question was, what do you think AI is going to change? One of the things that I probably like to add is that I think you touched on it, but I probably want to reinforce that the development of tools, for example, even if you still use Burp, for example, you can develop so many plugins with AI with just a prompt, as long as you know how to write a prompt. Yesterday I was having fun. I said, okay, give me a Chrome plugin for something, right? Something. And yeah, it was easy. And in 30 seconds, I received a Chrome plugin for something that I wanted. Something that I do not also, I don't know if you use that in your practice, maybe it's a hint you can use. I sometimes look at malware, old malware. So I put the code of old malware there, and then I start something else, right? That will take you a lot further than where you think you could be, right? Now, that's where you have the human part also. A lot of it is not possible without the human, because you need to first think what you want to achieve. That's where it comes to the point where you were saying that it's probably going to make us dumb. Because it's like you just be given a computer with Kali fully loaded on it, then you ask Kali to hack for you. Right? It's not going to happen.
No.
So you really need to know where you're going, and that's how you can then really accelerate. But I wanted to ask the question now. Do you think that AI, I have my own view, but do you think that AI is going to increase the lack of security professional, or do you think it's going to close that gap?
I think it's going to make the shortage worse, if you ask me, because again, this is going to empower everyone, and I think this will empower the attacking side first. Because like all of the stuff that I've mentioned in my previous answer, like phishing, like social engineering attacks, like those are out of scope. Like but people are still going to do them. So I think there's actually, the demand is going to rise, personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the first people who are really going to take advantage of AI is probably not going to be us, not on the same scale that attackers are.
Yeah.
And what attackers have more than we have is quite often a lot more like financial backing. Think about a ransomware group, right? They have money. At the end of the day, we have to sleep, and we're not employing, 10 people to find bugs for us, right? We're doing it. No, shockingly enough, hiring in the UK is awful. Don't live in London, can't hire in the UK. but we're not hiring 10 people under us, but ransomware operators are, and those 10 people do not need to necessarily be skilled. I still think that hacking, like on the kind of that we're doing, requires that human element much more than, like you say, like writing a phishing email, like write a convincing email that would convince my grandma, who I love dearly, that she needs to give me my pocket money of £7 million by the end of the week. Otherwise, I'm going to leak all their files on the internet. But she's my grandma, so please.
I echo this. Yeah, ransomware is the biggest problem. It's the most money involved there. The better you can impersonate someone, the better your success ratio. So yeah, AI will support them.
Yes, thank you. Follow-up question. Do you think universities and training programs need to review the way they teach hacking? They need to scrap the old methods and just do hacking with AI? Because a lot of people fear AI is going to replace them, but some people argue that it's those without AI that are going to be replaced. So what do you think?
So I can talk about this because I actually work for a university and I work as a lecturer, and this is a problem that literally all universities are now facing. My views here do not represent those of Manchester Metropolitan University, but I think, yeah, we have to. That, you know, students are going to have access to these AI tools throughout their entire career. We should be teaching them how to use them. It's really closed-minded of academics to say, you know, this is just plagiarism, and instead teach students, you know, this is what your career is going to look like. I think in education, one of the worst mistakes you could ever make is teaching somebody the same way you were taught. It doesn't help. Lecturers, and especially now post-pandemic, and universities and education providers in general, do need to look at how we teach the next generation of students and how we leverage things like not just AI, but also remote work and being able to have more interactive classes online, looking at how we can still deliver that value to students. I think the sector as a whole isn't really sure what to do about them. Me personally, I am not against students using AI in my classes, though my views do not represent those of Manchester Metropolitan University. It's definitely plagiarism according to them. So yeah, I think we have to change, but we always have to change. If your course isn't getting updated every single year and you teach cybersecurity, your course is out of date, and why are students paying £9,000 a year for it? They're getting ripped off.
We should go back also to the ground principles of what is education, and that's that you learn what is a fact and what is not, and how to proceed. And the same we need to learn students about how's the basics of threat modeling of an AI model. If I get answers back, how do I confirm it's indeed true or not, if it's hallucinating or not. A good takeaway for today is there's a website, plot4.ai. If you go there, it's some flashcard game where you learn to threat model AI models in a way that you don't have to be a technologist. So if we learn students that, and after we had learned them the ground principles of threat modeling an AI model, we should definitely learn them prompt properly, have an interactive course, and have fun. Because it's like Google. Everyone told me in school, don't use Google for your project.
In your pocket.
Exactly. And you see slowly the education is catching up, and the same with this.
I'm going to show my age now. When I was a GCSE student, it was the invention of graphical calculators, and I see some parallels there. Everyone was like, well, you can just type in a graph, right? And, and I think you have to move past that a little bit. But in terms of the skills shortage, I think there's an element that we're missing here a little bit, which is we're focusing on the security skills shortage, right? Which is, broadly speaking, there's not enough people graduating or knowing how to do cybersecurity. The problem gets bigger and the pool of resources gets smaller. And I think that AI can help with that a lot, right? Because it makes people more productive, right? So you can do more with less people. But I think the side that we've not spoken about is the developer side. And you touched on it earlier. You built a Chrome extension, right, very, very quickly. One of the hypotheses that we have at the moment is that this new way of generating code is just going to produce loads of rubbish web applications. All of a sudden, you're just going to see hundreds of these things popping up like mushrooms. And they're all going to be generated with one person with an AI engine. They're not going to be security tested. And so all of a sudden, this risk profile could just spread and spread and spread. And then that does contribute to the security skills program, because how do you how do you secure these applications that are being knocked up? So I think this is going to be a subject we're going to be talking about probably till midnight in the bar tonight. It's one of those really interesting ones. Let's see if there's any more.
I was wondering, as AI reduces sort of the entry into becoming a hacker, do you see this as positive or negative for the industry? As in, people could become, like, there'd be a larger amount of unethical hackers, so there could be more attacks against business looking for vulnerabilities in a malicious way rather than a positive?
Well, I think I basically mentioned that at the moment, unfortunately, it is the attacking side that probably can benefit from this the most. So it's going to take a while, I think, until, you know, the people who work on the inside of the company, like trying to secure all of the assets, will gain more than what the others can, because like they have freedom and they have no rules. We have to abide by the rules. So I think, like, maybe not for the industry, I think this is actually worse probably for the customer. Like any commercial company, any government is more at risk now, like, in my opinion. So.
As someone who makes YouTube videos, people often ask me, are you worried about your YouTube videos being used by like actual hackers, like actual dark web hackers? And I actually got through a video, I was doing a sponsorship with a company that does dark web monitoring. So I put my name into it. And the attackers wrote, bit cringe, but okay. I think with any new technology, the same as my videos, right? We're always going to have this debate of like, is this helping the bad side? And the answer is yes. But that doesn't mean it's not helping us as well. And that doesn't mean that we can't and shouldn't take advantage of what we can do with it. Are we going to see an increase in attacks, like essentially funneled by OpenAI having ChatGPT available? Sure. Does that really matter that much? Probably not, because they were probably going to do it anyway. And they probably might have just delayed their attack by maybe, I don't know, a few days, because it took them that long to find like malware on a darknet forum, right? I don't think the conversation of could this be used by attackers should ever really stop progress, because I think it is showing to be really useful for the good guys as well.
And that's why it's so important that if your company is able to share fixed vulnerability reports, let them share the knowledge.
Yeah.
Because that's how I learned to hack. And that's a little bit like AI. The good guys, the bad guys use them. You have an opportunity here to, if the researcher agrees with you, to share the insights. And that also the bad guys might be trained, but there are more good people in this world in the end.
Yeah.
So.
Great, and I think we have time for... Okay, great. Time for 3 more questions, perhaps? Let's go for this gentleman in the corner.
Hello. Just checking this is working. Sweet. Adam Smith, Thomson Reuters. I just wanted to check from a sort of labour sort of market perspective. Obviously, we've seen sort of the writers' strike in America go up against AI tools being used to sort of take their jobs. As these sort of technologies develop, do you think there's a concern, as sort of Laurie mentioned, with a lot of applications being put on with sort of duff code, that there is a risk of people like yourselves almost being replaced by someone who thinks, well, the AI can generate the effect that I want it to do. I don't really care if it's checked to be good or bad. I'm just going to sort of put it out there. It's done the problem. It's fixed the problem. Let's hope for the best, in the sort of same way Google Translate has done for the sort of translation industry. And sort of on the follow-up to that, just a little bit, because I actually don't know, when ChatGPT, et cetera, puts out code that it's sort of generated, does it have a greater or sort of lesser chance at hallucinating that information compared to when it puts out sort of normal, quote unquote, like languages? I'm just wondering, because code is sort of a set series of rules, and I know language is also obviously a set series of rules that just keeps breaking all the time. I just wonder if it's better in that sort of form or not, because I simply don't know. Thank you very much.
So I actually tested this. Because I was a developer in a former life, I actually told ChatGPT to generate some like typical things, login form, registration form. I looked at the code to see whether or not it's vulnerable. Yes, if you do not prompt ChatGPT to say in a secure way, it will introduce vulnerabilities. In this case, I was testing PHP code, and it was doing a MySQL query directly, so SQL injection type vulnerability. So super bad vulnerability. I think the risk of developers using ChatGPT to write insecure code is much higher than I would be worried about like an AI stealing my job. Because when I speak to people who are developers, they are using ChatGPT, honestly, a lot more than we are. In like, oh, I just need to write this one piece of code, I'll just get ChatGPT to do it, and I'll just paste it in. And they kind of shut off their brain a little bit. In terms of how you defeat that, I think that's where you start to kind of have to teach people maybe a bit of prompt engineering, but also have kind of DevSecOps environments where you are like going over the code with security tools and flagging very obvious security flaws. But I think it's the unobvious ones that is still going to be paying my wages, so I don't mind.
What happens actually if you prompt ChatGPT is behind this interface, there are multiple models. So it's not one model. It's like layers of models. So if you give it a good training set of properly coded registration forms, you could end up with a situation where it gives you quality types of products. But that requires you to know how the model works, to have your threat model there, and that you discuss with each other. We accept that in 10% of the prompts, it fails, and it's horrible. But in the 90, we accept it. Why? Because otherwise we could not create this website for old people, whatever. And the same is with medicine. If I prescribe you some medicine, we know that in a certain amount of people, it will kill you. But most people are benefiting from it. So that's the balance. As a society, we need to have to get this discussion going. How do we accept that the model fails, and where's the cutoff? And this is a super hard discussion because people are bad in the statistics. And that's the old Tesla discussion. Should a Tesla pick 3 persons on the left or the first person on the front if it's about to crash and it's steering?
Well, you've also got the argument there that those 4 people were actually really bad, so it should kill all of them.
Yeah, it depends on the knowledge graph and the model you use. Yeah. It's a really good question there. Yeah.
And I would also like to add a little bit on the labor market and like people going out of jobs. I think every job where there is a proportion of true creativity, and like hacking is a very creative thing. Like that's why I'm like I wouldn't be worried about it that much. Even I think hackers actually have maybe a slight edge over developers, perhaps, where a lot is standardized, and usually good enough is sort of good enough. But I'm on a personal level, I am very worried about other huge industries that have like all of the potential of people rapidly losing jobs. And like part of me wonders, do we actually have a safety mechanism for all of this? What's going to happen when like automation truly starts, like let's say in a year or 2?
And I'm super worried about in medicine. We've got this pharmaceutical industry which had a lot of power in the last 100 years, and we figured out how to get rid of that a little bit by creating generics, so medication that has no patent anymore. But what do we do if those pharmaceutical companies start training models that are really good at predicting certain diseases or treatments, and there is a patent on it that it won't lose because you keep on reinventing new extra models, et cetera, et cetera? Do we have any laws for that or any thoughts on it? And how do we, if you create a lot of power in a company, is that good for society? That's a challenging thing. It's not like bug bounty hacking LLM thing, but it's a different subject, but it's an important subject to discuss with each other.
Really quick follow-up, sorry. Is it possible to watermark any of like the code that sort of gets put out from like ChatGPT the same way you can watermark sort of images?
It happens right now. It's super easy to understand how it does. If it generates text, it defines at a certain position. We can pick now 100 different words, but it limits its vocabulary to 20. And if you do that often enough, then you can see a pattern. Because Microsoft is owning ChatGPT for a bit, and for a little piece. They have Bing search engine, and they don't want to retrain their own search engine of the model on its own. So they need to have some patterns there.
Yeah,
This is what I know.
I was
interesting. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to quickly add to that, is that a lot of education providers say that that's possible, and what it's been doing is it's flagging genuine student work. Yeah. So it's definitely something that is like kind of been thrust upon society, but nobody really knows what to do with it and how they're going to detect it.
On the watermarking subject, China's just released new guidelines on generative AI, and that's one of the top points is that all generated images and text has to have a watermark of some sort. So, and they're coming obviously to the AI Cybersecurity Summit next month if it goes ahead. So there's going to be lots of discussion about watermarking. I think it's going to be one of the hot topics. Yeah.
How to bypass them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. One of the fun things though, talking about insecure code, I saw someone generate some code. They said, "Can you generate me some Java which does a certain thing?" And it generated it, and it had a security vulnerability in it. And they said, "Can you generate the same code but securely?" And it generated the same function but with security embedded in there. And it kind of reminded me of earlier when I was saying about nuclei templates. We can't do that because you're a hacker. That's bad. And then you're like, "No, but I'm good." And it's, "Oh, okay, here you go." So I think there's going to be lots of research into what prompts are going to generate this. And then speaking about the labor thing, so the question I asked at the beginning of my talk was, is the internet secure today? I asked this question to the founders of HackerOne, and Yobert, one of our co-founders, he said to me that one of the problems that we have today is that cross-site scripting, really basic vulnerability, is still the #1 paid vulnerability on HackerOne. It hasn't changed for 10 years. And so if we really are creating a safe internet, we should be aiming to eliminate entire bug categories like cross-site scripting. And then focus on the fun stuff like the IoT, the hardware hacking, the creative hacking that requires critical thinking and business logic flaws, this kind of thing. We're now on the cusp of being able to solve things like cross-site scripting with the use of AI. And of course, everyone's terrified it's going to knock people out of jobs. And so it's this kind of like balance, isn't it? And I think that on the whole, for society, we have to think about what's best for our neighbors, our children, our families. And if that means eliminating entire bug categories and perhaps reducing earnings potential temporarily, on the whole, that's probably a good thing, right? Yeah. And it means that we can focus on the 12K crits, which are really going to be we're really going to be proud of, rather than the basic vulnerabilities. And what I don't see is those critical vulnerabilities. I don't see those being generated. I see those always requiring human mind to massage out the system. Yeah. Well, we spent quite a lot of time on that one. Are there any more questions? We have one question in the middle here, and then we'll have time. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one. Since there was a lot of talk about the labor market, do ethical hackers pay income tax? Are you self-employed, like Uber drivers?
I will take this one.
I actually invited the tax authority to my home to ask them in person and to get them to write something called a ruling thing, it's called in Dutch, about what type of tax do I need to pay, since it's from a tax authority perspective, it's like playing a match, and you might win some, you might lose some. And I can't send you an invoice and enforce the invoice. I have to keep my fingers crossed, the bounty gets paid. So you pay income tax, no VAT, in the Netherlands.
In the UK, you are registered as self-employed, and you give HMRC 2 boxes, one that says income and one that says expenditure, and then they calculate the tax you pay from that.
I'm from the UK. Sorry. And there's a trick if you go to Portugal. Some hackers do that you don't pay any income tax for, I think, 1.5 years if you go there as an expat. So that's...
In America, there's a W8BN form. So the tax forms are handled by HackerOne as well. There's an in-platform tax form so that we pay people after they've filled in a statement saying they're paying tax, basically. Yeah. Death and taxes, can't avoid them, even hackers. Should we go for one more question? Yeah, final question. Final question, yeah.
If one of your hackers was probing a system and they did something destructive by accident, how firmly do you stand behind them, both sort of morally and publicly, but also legally? Do you provide solid legal backing?
It's a good question. So it would definitely depend on the nature of the engagement that you have with HackerOne. So different. So a vulnerability disclosure program would be quite different to a pen test, for example. What we normally say in the situations where, like, a denial of service condition or a system gets tipped over, is that hackers aren't creating problems, they're just pointing out problems you already have. And what you're paying for is you're paying for finding out that first, right? Rather than finding out, 9 o'clock on a Friday night. So we would encourage people to test systems, even if it does mean that things fall over, because it's better to find out about it now in a controlled way than it is to find out about it in an uncontrolled way, or perhaps in a way that is in the hands of someone who's not incentivized to report it to you responsibly. Yeah.
Do you provide lawyers?
Do we provide lawyers for hackers? Not that I know of. Yeah.
But it's a challenging thing. If you work for the government, for example, try to create laws that protect actual ethical hackers. Belgium is a role model in that. They fully protect their hackers. You don't need any safe harbor or whatever policy. You're protected. As soon as you can show you did things ethically. And of course, you've got different types of liabilities. If I tip over the server, you have a big loss of income, etc. Stuff gets complicated. But try to press for those rules.
The UK was looking for something similar in the Computer Misuse Act as well, having a safe harbor, like a safe harbor something built in. But with the government, who knows whether or not that will be done before the election.
Yeah, so in America there's the CFAA, and in the UK there's a CMA, and actually HackerOne has lobbied to better define the concept of good faith security research and have it protected under law. So at the moment in the United States, that is protected under law. If something goes wrong, then you can say I'm a good faith security researcher, then that you won't have any trouble. In the UK, we are campaigning to have stronger language in the Computer Misuse Act here. At the moment, the definition of good faith is not very well defined, basically. But generally, you see around the world in places like the UK, the USA, and places like Belgium, the Netherlands as well, Sweden, the Hansa countries, it's pretty well defined. The place where it's not very well defined would be places like Germany, where they have very strict cybersecurity laws, and sometimes Switzerland too. But I expect they'll fall into line with the European Union and the UK and the US in the course of time.
Also, haven't you heard? ChatGPT has replaced all lawyers by now, so.
Yeah.
Question. Hackers, ladies and gentlemen.